Family News, I'm Chris Woodward. On the 12th day of a partial government shutdown, key lawmakers are at the White House for a border security briefing. Fox News Radio's Jared Halpern has more from Capitol Hill.
Top Republicans and Democrats in the House and Senate, 8 lawmakers in total, have been invited to a briefing on border security in the White House Situation Room. President Trump will join that briefing along with Homeland Security officials. It's the first direct talks between Democrats and the president since a partial government shutdown was triggered before Christmas. When Democrats take control of the House tomorrow, they intend to move legislation that would reopen the government. But the spending plan does not provide new border wall funding demanded by President Trump. On Capitol Hill, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
Mitt Romney, the 2012 GOP presidential nominee and incoming Utah senator, has quickly set himself apart from other Republicans in the new Congress with a blistering attack on President Trump's leadership and character. Romney wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post that said Trump's conduct over the past 2 years, particularly his actions last month, is evidence that the president has not risen to the mantle of the office. President Trump tweeted that Romney ought to be a team player, but even Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky has defended the president, saying Romney wants to signal how virtuous he is. U.S.-based Roman Catholic bishops have gathered for a week-long retreat to focus on the church abuse scandal. Fox's Jeff Manasso reports.
Organizers say the week-long retreat at Mundelein Seminary in suburban Chicago will focus on prayer and spiritual reflection and not formulating policy regarding the church's sex abuse scandal. The bishops' retreat begins a day after the Associated Press reported that the Vatican in November blocked U.S. bishops from taking measures to address the clergy abuse scandal. It also serves as a prelude to a summit of the world's bishops at the Vatican next month to forge a comprehensive response to the crisis. In Chicago, Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
The meetings follow 2 reports this year from state attorneys general alleging negligence and a mass cover-up by state church leaders. A former resident at a prominent Ohio hospital is now being publicly shamed for anti-Semitic messages on social media indicating she was willing to compromise the well-being of patients. Here's Fox's Evan Brown.
Lara Kolab spent only 3 months as a resident osteopathic physician at Cleveland Clinic. She hasn't worked there since September, but it was discovered on social media that Kolab posted anti-Semitic messages, including one stating she would purposefully give Jewish patients incorrect medication. Cleveland Clinic denounces her statements and is investigating further. Ohio's medical board tells Fox News Kolab has no medical license, only a training certificate, which was only valid for the duration of her residency. Kolab was trained in osteopathic medicine at Touro College, a Jewish institution in New York. Eben Brown, Fox News.
Vermont's population is among the lowest in the U.S., but a study from United Van Lines indicates people are moving to the New England state. The moving company's annual nationwide mover study tracks customers' state-to-state migration patterns. It found that Vermont saw the highest percentage of inbound moves in 2018. 4 western states filled out the top 5, those being Oregon, Idaho, Nevada, and Arizona. New Jersey had the highest percentage of outbound in Kansas. In final news this hour, the U.S. wants answers about the arrest of an American citizen in Russia. Fox's Simon Owen reports.
Paul Whelan's twin brother, David, says the 48-year-old was in Russia to help a friend who was getting married there.
Paul agreed to help because Paul had already been to Russia a number of times, knew how to get around the town.
But Whelan disappeared last week, and Russia has since confirmed he's being held for alleged spying. His brother voicing concern.
I just can't imagine him getting sideways of the law in Russia or doing anything anywhere close to breaking an espionage act.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says the U.S. wants an explanation from Russia.
That is American Family News for this hour. For more news and information, visit onenewsnow.com.
Pastor Joseph Parker.
You know, obviously when things are going well, it's much easier to have an attitude of thanksgiving and praise to the Lord. But even when things are going difficult, it's important to know, too, there's never a time it's inappropriate for us to thank and praise God. Now, some may ask, well, what about when you're going through difficult times, when you're walking through the valley of the shadow of death? We can have 2 different responses. We can worship or we can whine.
Tune in to the Hour of Intercession, weekday afternoons at 1 Central on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
I'm in this fight all the way. I am optimistic. I believe in what we can do together.
Warren set up just an exploratory committee, which allows her to fundraise and fill staff positions. Really no guarantee of a full-blown presidential campaign, but insiders expect to see one.
We'll see how she does. I wish her well. I hope she does well. I'd love to run against her.
This is a stalemate that the president is content to ride out. Unless he gets funding for the border wall and border security, he's simply just going to let this thing play out and see just how much pressure he can apply on the Democrats.
I think the president is telling us what he wants, and he's willing to do some things to get what he wants. And to my Democratic friends, there's some things that you want that can be had if you agree to border security in a reasonable way.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Simon Peter, a servant and apostle of Jesus Christ, to those who through the righteousness of God and our Savior, Jesus Christ, have received a faith as precious as ours, grace and peace be yours in abundance through the knowledge of God and of Jesus our Lord. His divine power has given us everything we need for a godly life through our knowledge of him who called us by his own glory and goodness. Through these he has given us his very great and precious promises, so that through them you may participate in the divine nature, having escaped the corruption of the world caused by evil desires. Welcome to Stacy on the Right here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. It's my pleasure to be with you today, and Happy New Year. You are in 2019. We're all here. We made it. We're here together, and we have a ton of things to get into today on the program. You might have noticed I had a little time off, and I had to recharge and reconnect, get time with my family, step away from not just politics, but online social media. I had so little time with my phone, so little time. My laptop stayed closed, and it was a blessing. I'm so glad that I took the time off to do that. I'm refreshed. I'm ready to be here, and I'm super excited about today's show. I was just reading from 2 Peter 1:1-4, and that scripture really spoke to me over the break. We are in a new year, and there's a lot going on. A lot of people are doing what they call New Year's resolutions, which I'm not that big into those, but I am big into the idea that God has something for us to do, and we can't aimlessly bebop around and kind of just waiting on God to so-called, what does he have for us to do? We're always to be working and obedient, but there's more to it than that. As Christians, we can and should set goals. We should pray over them. We should ask God for guidance, and we should act. And so it's an active participation role that we share, and we are looking to God for direction and guidance, but we're constantly moving and making sure that we're actively in obedience. And so that scripture, I couldn't get enough of it over the break. I read it again and again, and I found it encouraging. In this scripture, you have this, it's an exhortation. Grace and peace be yours in abundance through the knowledge of God and of Jesus Christ our Lord. So it's not go out and be, accept the grace and be abundant. It's through the knowledge of God and Jesus Christ our Lord. That means we're studying, we're showing ourselves approved, and we're hitting the road running. We're actually saying, I'm chasing after you, God. I'm chasing after the knowledge that you have for me. I'm growing in you. That's my primary focus. So that doesn't mean we don't work. We don't clean our homes. We don't take care of our kids. We don't attend functions and go do things that must be done. But it means we put God first. We get after him first. He is our first priority. We do that first. And then afterwards, we chase the other things down, finding them easier and our loads lightened because we have connected to the power source. And in verse 4, it says, through these he has given us this very great and precious promise, so that through them you may participate in the divine nature. So that's an impressive and exciting and almost daunting prospect if you think about it. God's telling us we get to participate in the divine nature. The Bible says we are seated in heavenly realms when we pray. That's where we go for our recharging, for our energy. I see a lot of people with these bands and people are promoting all over social media, you are enough, because a lot of us, and notice I said us, we suffer from, these sometimes occasional, sometimes frequent crisis of whether or not we're doing a good enough job, or if we have what it takes to make the grade, if we have what it takes to get the job done. And that is an attack from the enemy, but it's also a result of our flesh and the true fact that we aren't enough. You're not enough. I am not enough. None of us are enough. God is more than enough. He's everything. And when we plug into that power source and we get that energy, it's a blast. It's like it's an infusion of everything that God has for us, just the right amount at just the right time. That's when we're enough in Christ to be able to do what he's tasked us to do, the things that he's given us to do. And every one of us has something that he's given us to do. So as we move into 2019, I always start the year off by talking about continually updating goals and kind of reorienting, double checking and saying, you know, what have I been praying for? Where has God moved? And in what ways do I see him directing me to either continue and stay the course, or maybe to adjust, or maybe to start something new or step out in faith somewhere where I previously have never been. And God will do that. But it's funny, I haven't seen him in my life doing that in any way where I've said, okay, sit down, I'm going to make this list, and then this is going to happen, and then we'll go to step 2, and then we'll go to 2A, 2B, 2C, and then over here to 3, and I think this is how it should go, and so boom, Father, please bless this, let's get it done. It never happens that way. Rather, it happens that I have prepared myself, and I'm plugged in and connected to him, and I feel that nudge, oh, this is something that's right for me to do. And it's an opportunity. Usually they come to me. I don't seek them out. They come to me. The ones I'm seeking out, those don't come to fruition. The ones that come to me are the ones that are profitable and make a difference. And I'm able to, through those, glorify God and stay within my mandate as a wife and a mom, honoring my husband and our household and our family, putting them above any work that I do. So it's a growing season, but we're always in a growing season. So 2019, we're here, and God is still in control, and no matter what the political winds may bring, politics is a tool that we use to impact our lives and to exert control over our government. Politics is not the end goal. The gospel is all things. It's the end goal. Teaching it, sharing it, knowing it for ourselves, and spreading it. People who already know Jesus Christ are much better able to access the benefits of obedience and to get outside of what politics says we can or can't do, what our government says we can or can't do, and get into walking in joyful abundance in Christ, which is that's not about wealth. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not about prosperity. It's about joy and peace and self-control and all of the other fruits of the Spirit that enable us to do all things in Christ. So welcome to the show today. We have Lowell Ponte. He's coming on with us next segment, political columnist, consultant, and author. He's got a piece up about the border wall, and this is something that is a huge political, it's a nightmare. And the only reason it's a nightmare, I have to go into that today on the show, is because I'm seeing the Republicans in a very destructive pattern that is one that they've repeated before. It's the same old story, same old song, same old dance, not even a different tune with the Republicans in this border issue. And so I'm going to get into that, but I first want to say, whether you're listening to the show first time ever, welcome. If you are a longtime listener and really staunch supporter of American Family Radio and American Family Association, welcome. You're home. And the reason I'm saying that on the first show back in 2019 is because I'm home too. So I've been here for a couple of years, but it's been just over 90 days. It's been a few months since the show was brought up to American Family Radio. And so I feel like we've gotten past the kind of new phase where people were in shock about the schedule change and all of that. And people are now accepting the program and are really excited about it. And I get a lot of notes from people saying, oh, welcome edition, welcome, welcome, welcome. And I want to say to anyone who's listening, welcome home, because this is your home for news and information with the biblical worldview. This is the largest Christian radio network in the country. And the work that's being done here is being done as yeomen working as unto the Lord, tending the vines in the fields until the return of Christ Jesus. And so that's a hugely different perspective than other commercial radio networks have. And there's nothing wrong with those other commercial radio networks. I've guest hosted on almost all of them, and I think they're fantastic. But this is your home for news and information from the Christian worldview. And so I welcome you here, and I just encourage you to get the app on TuneIn. Make us one of your browser favorites there on TuneIn. get the American Family Radio app, get the Urban Family Talk app, and also visit our websites, onenewsnow.com. And I believe we have 1millionmoms.com, 1milliondads, and then also Urban Family Talk and AFR.net. You can visit the blog, The Stand, and you can hit subscribe on all of those and get notifications and updates so we become a habitual, routine part of your day. And you'll be hearing from hosts all over the network from morning until night, 24 hours a day of good content, great programming here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. So welcome home. Welcome to 2019. Let's get into this. We have this information about, and these three pieces tie together. First, I'm going to talk to you about something that just happened in Germany. You have these 4 students, or they're teenagers. I don't know that they're students, because in Germany you actually finish high school, the very basic part of high school. You finish it at 10th grade, and then you can go on to 2 more years of high school, but it's college preparatory. But not everyone goes on to that. So if you're a Syrian or Afghani or someone from outside of the country, and you're coming in and you've already had 10 years of schooling, you're not absolutely going to be forced to go to school. And so these 17 to 19-year-old kids, or young men, as they were, actually went on a rampage, and they harmed a lot of people. I don't mean like 1 or 2 people. These guys were running around. They had 12 people that they were physically assaulting, just running around, actually physically assaulting them. They left 12 people aged 13 to 42 injured during random attacks while they were hurling racist statements. This was at 6:30 p.m. on Saturday at Amberg Station, and this is in Germany. Now, you might say, well, it's Germany. I mean, news is news, but what does that have to do? Well, let's listen. Why does it have to do with us? Because we have rock-hurling gangs of people, various ages, at our southern border right now who've recently launched an attack at Border Patrol and were repelled. Just a day after this happened in Germany, they were repelled with tear gas. Some of them actually got across the border illegally, but they were all repelled with tear gas. And the reason that they were assaulting the border is because they want to come in here. But and a lot of them say they're coming here to work. But if they can't find work, they'll be roaming around our train stations assaulting people. They're already doing that. And so I know a lot of individuals will say, well, Stacey, the thing is, they're just coming here for a better life. But it's not a better life if you're stealing it. And you're stealing it from taxpayers. Illegal immigration costs us $70,000 per illegal immigrant a year. That's $70,000 a year. So while we were all upset, me included, at hearing that we're going to send $10 billion to South America, we'd previously been doing that under the Bush administration. Not $10 billion, but a similar amount in those years, dollars, reduced by inflation, because it was before the Obama administration. We were sending money for drug interdiction programs and to keep the gangs at bay so that people could live in their war-torn, crime-infested countries instead of coming here. And what happened was you had Obama reducing funding for those programs and eliminating some of them because he said we should help the people here in the United States. Only he wasn't talking about people like you and I, citizens. He's talking about illegal immigrants, which obviously the reason we don't hear the number 11 million anymore is because it's been debunked by leftists who were doing a study on the issue. And now we know it's 22 million. And if it's 22 million, it's probably more like the 38 million I've been telling you, meaning that there are more illegal immigrants here than there are black people, because there are only 38 million blacks in America. Yes, I said only. I'm black, and if it wasn't for abortion, there'd be almost 50 million black people in America. But, thanks Margaret Sanger and Planned Parenthood, Cecile Richards, Barack Obama, and Eric Holder's wife, who owns an abortion clinic. So you've got these guys in Germany, and after they set upon the passersby, they then were running because the police were called. And as the police were approaching, they just were beating people down as they were running away. Interior Minister Seehofer was speaking to Bild News Agency, and he said, the events in Amberg have upset me a lot. These are violent excesses that we cannot tolerate. If asylum seekers commit violent crimes, they must leave our country. If the existing laws are not enough, they must be changed. Interior Minister Seehofer, I agree, sir. Yeah. But that's what you should be doing already. You should be getting rid of every criminal. Every one of them should be deported. And we shouldn't be letting them in. When we get back, we'll have Lowell Ponte, political columnist and author, right here on Stacey on the Right on American Family Radio.
Hello, everyone. everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. 2019 is upon us, and we're going to be going back to Washington, D.C. and to Williamsburg for our spiritual heritage tours. And if you've been wanting to go, maybe this is the year for you. These tours fill up several months in advance, and one of the reasons they do is because we have an actual historian, a professional historian that comes on our tour with us. His name is Stephen McDowell. He's the president of the Providence Foundation, and he knows more about early American history, especially the Christian influence on early American history. He knows more than anybody I know. So, if you want to go with us, you can find out more information at spiritualheritagetours.com. That's in June and September. Pick the month you want to go. Find out more information at spiritualheritagetours.com. That's spiritualheritagetours.com.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a legacy moment. I have a friend who saw a lot of combat in Vietnam. In fact, he was severely wounded and highly decorated for his valor in combat. I remember asking him once what it was like to constantly be in harm's way. He said, besides being scared to death most of the time, we realized we needed each other, and so we tended to focus on what was really important. We watched each other's backs. Guys prayed who would otherwise never even mention God's name. Under pressure, under those dangerous circumstances, we realized that we held each other's lives literally in our hands. I sometimes feel as if the Church of Jesus Christ in this country is not desperate enough. We don't seem to sense an utter need for God and our need for each other. People are dying all around us. The work of God shouldn't be something we do on the backstroke. It's serious business. We desperately and urgently need Him. Because we can't change lives. Only He can. The early disciples were seized with this sense of urgency, this passionate cry to God in utter dependence. In Acts chapter 1, Jesus has ascended. He's in heaven, and now the task is before them. Listen to these words in Acts chapter 1, verse 14. All these with one accord were devoting themselves to prayer, together with the women and Mary, the mother of Jesus, and his brothers. This is in the context of urgency. They were continually devoting themselves to prayer because these early followers were desperate. They saw the tremendous need for unity and persistent prevailing prayer. Here's what I want you to remember today. Ask God to show you the urgent, desperate need of the people all around you. Ask Him to give you a burden to pray and a heart for unity.
Join Crawford Loritz tomorrow for another Legacy Moment.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button over at Stacy on the Right and on Twitter and Instagram, where I am at Stacy on the Right. The Stacy on the Right Show on Facebook. We love that page. We're at 79,000 people liking it and following. And so we're happy to have you subscribe over there, even with the kind of crushing amount of algorithm negativity that we get from Facebook. We're still there. We're still hanging in. And so it's really nice to interact with you on those spots as well. Welcome to our terrestrial listeners in 32 states, in 800 communities. We're so happy to have you with us, and also our live stream audience all over the place on our different platforms. Right now, it's my pleasure to welcome Lowell Ponte. He's a political columnist, consultant, and author. Lowell, thank you for joining the show today.
Stacy, wonderful to be back with you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. I'm glad to have you here, Lowell, with your expertise on this border wall. And so just full disclosure, and you've been on the show before, you know how fiery hot I am on immigration. I have actually had what I thought to be some pretty interesting ideas about funding the border wall, but I don't think the president listens to the show, and I think that's a bit of a loss, but I don't think he's tuning in. And so I don't know that he's getting these wonderful ideas. The article outlines some. Could you share what some of the funding mechanisms could be?
Oh, sure, and understand just why this is important. If your listeners haven't thought about this, we would pay a huge price for building the wall. We'd pay an even larger price for not building it. For example, a great deal of the drugs that flow into the United States, many of them from communist China, waging its own modern opium war against us, last year killed 70,000 people for fentanyl, heroin, and the like. Much of it came across the border. That's more people dead in 1 year than died during the whole Vietnam War on our side. That's just one of the things they do. 10% of all the auto accidents and deaths in this country now are associated with an illegal alien driving in the United States. We have criminals coming into the country. We have the average illegal alien coming into the country now costs $70,000 in welfare and social benefits. So when you have 22 million such people, and their taking of welfare increases the longer they're here. 63% of them take welfare when they arrive. 70% are taking welfare by the time they've been here for 10 years. Imagine the drain that plus pushing wages lower, plus spending $28 billion a year just sending remittances back to Mexico alone, taken out of our economy and sent to another country. And those dollars often coming from welfare. You begin to see we pay a tremendous price for it. So what could we do to deal with it? Well, we could put a 20% tax on tariffs, the kind of border adjustment tax. We could impose a tax on those remittances in one way or another that go back out to Mexico. We could see that Mexican drug cartel money, when it is apprehended, is used to help build the wall. Mexico could help pay for the wall in that way, for instance. We could issue wall bonds, similar to war bonds. We could sell naming rights on the wall or advertising along urban sections of the wall. We could make donations for the wall tax deductible or allow tax credits for them. By the way, if the wall cost $25 billion, that would be a one-time cost of only $78 for each of 323 million Americans, or around $310 for a family of four. But what you would get for that one-time payment is you and your children would continue to own the country, which is quite significant because these illegals are being used by one of our two political parties as a way of replacing the electorate that's here now. That includes the legal aliens who followed the law, who obeyed all the process they needed to. That includes many sectors of the economy, including African Americans, who have been devastated by this flood of illegals driving down wages and taking away jobs. Crowdfunding for the wall would involve paying, or if only Trump's 62 million voters were paying for it, they would pay $396 apiece. But there, too, they would be keeping their country, because the truth is walls work. I mean, Israel's wall has reduced terrorist attacks by more than 95%. Communist China is now expanding its ancient wall, its Great Wall, along the border with North Korea. Still good after more than 2,000 years at keeping a flood of North Koreans out if things break down there. Mexico could build its own even stronger wall on its southern border. It has certainly done that. So there's ample room for a wall. And one other thing, they talk about discrimination against Latinos. Latino or Hispanic, by the way, is not a racial category. It's an ethnic category.
Yeah.
That's important to appreciate. But Barack Obama was perfectly willing to engage in anti-Hispanic activity. That is, Barack Obama, there was a law here for many decades called the wet foot, dry foot law that said if you're a Cuban fleeing communist oppression in Cuba and you get 1 foot on the shore of Florida, you are guaranteed asylum here. You are safe in the United States. That was for people fleeing communism. Barack Obama, by executive order, got rid of that. Why did he end it? Because Cubans tend to vote Republican.
Yeah, because they want to get as far
he
away
only
from...
wants Latinos who vote Democrat.
Right. It's all a game about winning power. And so the suggestions that you made, the one about remittances, I talked about that 2 years ago when the president first assumed the presidency. Let's talk a little bit about the background on it, because these are wonderful ideas, but some of them have to go through Congress, correct? We no longer have all 3 parts of Congress, and even when we did, or not 3 parts of Congress, all 3 parts of government, we no longer have the House. We have the Senate, and we're pretty strong there, but we don't have the House. And there's no way Nancy Pelosi is going to help us with this. So, and even if we did control it, we had some schisms there where you have these Chamber of Commerce rhino Republicans who they really don't want to see an end to illegal immigration because they want more cheap labor. So the remittances, does that have to go through Congress? Because it sounds like a tax, and Congress holds the purse strings. So, do you need congressional approval?
It probably would, even though there have been individual states, such as Oklahoma, that have taken their own action on it. Oklahoma began a wire transfer fee law that in 2017 had raised more than $67.2 million for a drug control fund. So individual states could act, but there's a larger concept here to remember. The president is commander-in-chief. The United States is being invaded by people who are literally waging chemical warfare. I mean, that's what 70 million Americans, or 70,000 Americans dying every year from illegal drugs, many of them coming across the border. The president has already ordered military to go down and govern the border. I think the president could unilaterally take a national defense action, or a whole variety of them, on the border, if he was willing to take the political heat and pressure for doing so, and justify it as commander-in-chief. He doesn't really need either House of Congress to back him on that.
Okay. So, and I did see that story. And in fact, I want to highlight that a little bit. And this is pretty interesting because when you were talking about raising money, there's already a GoFundMe that has $17 or $18 million. I check it periodically. 18 million, I think it's up to, for funding border wall. The guy who's doing it is a triple amputee. He's definitely not in it for himself. But
well, to be fair, there are more than one GoFundMe pages, and the people behind them, to some degree, accuse one another of trying to stage rip-off kind of activity. I don't mean this particular case, but you do have to be aware. You do have to research before you donate money to those things.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. But I like the simple math that you named off, the 369. I think I could probably find 1,000 people that I know via Facebook or in real life who would be willing to pay 369. I mean, that's an amount that most Americans can get together in certain income brackets. But when you talk about the $28 billion paid as remittances, so let's say states began to take this on, especially states that have the bigger issues. So California would never do it, but a state like Missouri could do it. We have utter control.
By the way, California, where I live, just so you get some perspective, 1/3 of all the nation's welfare recipients are in California. More than 1/4 of all the illegal aliens are in California. More than 1 out of 5 Californians could be officially classed as in poverty. And you wonder why the Democrat-style welfare state works so well here. Well, that's what the whole system was designed to do.
But that's intentional.
The Dreamers were going to help. The Dreamers were deeply involved in pushing to get Democrats elected in California in the last election. California 2 years ago implemented a thing called vote harvesting that's illegal in most states, whereby the state routinely sends up to 5 absentee ballots to every household likely to vote Democrat, that is, has a Hispanic name or the like attached to it. And then, days before the election, a vote harvester goes around and knocks on the door and says, "I'm here to pick up your ballot." "Oh, senor, we have not filled it out. We do not even know if we are permitted to vote." "You just leave that to me. Just sign there and give me your blank ballot, and I'll take care of it for you." That is legal in California now.
It seems like there'd be a way to stop that.
A single Democrat could fill an 18-wheel truck with ballots filled out that way, or that they fill out themselves, and turn them in on election. That's why you saw so many Republicans win on election night, and then 5, 6, 8 days later, suddenly the election results were reversed by ballots appearing from nowhere by the tens of thousands.
Well, but it seems like that should be a federal issue where the state of California is actually committing voter fraud and disenfranchising voters, and it seems like...
Oh, of course. Since April 1st, it has been automatic that if you go to the Department of Motor Vehicles to do something else, like get a driver's license, you are registered to vote. And you are not registered as a citizen, you are registered to vote as a resident, quote unquote. So therefore, you are immune from any legal error involved in that. You never claimed to be a citizen, and yet you will be given ballots. You will be allowed to vote, and no one will challenge you. By the way, Greg Smith and I talk a lot about this in our latest book, our 7th book, Money, Morality, and the Machine. And the good news is, to start out the new year right, we would be happy to give to your many brilliant listeners absolutely free and post-paid a copy of this book. It will not cost you a penny. This is our little mission from God, to arm people with information so they can protect themselves and their children and grandchildren. And to get the free book, all you need to do is call a toll-free number, 800-630-1492, like the year Columbus sailed the ocean blue. That's 800-630-1492.
Fantastic. So do you have solutions in the book, things that people can do to actually stop this?
Oh, we have a whole chapter in the book called Totally Devoted, D-E-V-O-T-E-D, showing all the different tricks that they now use to take away your votes. It's a truly, well, it's discouraging when you read that, but it's shocking to see how the American
Can you share a couple of the solutions? Because the information that you've shared is pretty devastating. But obviously there's a remedy for it.
For one thing, you notice Democrats have opposed every single safeguard to prevent false voting. No voter ID, no photo ID, no fingerprint, no nothing that could prove who a voter was, because they say it would be unfair to voters who aren't willing to call someone and have such a voter ID provided automatically at their home for free. That's just too oppressive for them, but they need a voter ID to get into a speech, for example, by Hillary Clinton or other Democrat candidates. We've seen gerrymandering go wild. In fact, in this last election, Democrat judges in Pennsylvania and North Carolina wiped out large parts of the electoral maps that had already been drawn for their states, and these liberal judges redrew the maps themselves in a way that favored Democrats. The great master of this, of course, was Barack Obama. He created the Obamamander, in which the whole southern border of the U.S. was redrawn to include all of Mexico and half of Central America in our voter mass here. The effort to allow felons to vote. Now, you may say these people have paid their debt to society, even though in many cases, in California, for example, they want people still in prison allowed to vote who have not yet paid their debt to society. But in any event, the idea of allowing felons to vote is rather interesting. Do you want your congressman elected by the felon vote? Do you want him to think, what can I do to help felons in their view of the world? How can I serve them and get their vote in the next election? When a liberal says to you, though, I want felons allowed to vote, you should smile at them and say, you know, I think you're right. A person's constitutional right should come back when they've served their time, including their Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. Don't you agree, Mr. Liberal? And you will suddenly find the liberal going, well, I didn't mean guns. Oh, no, we can't let them have guns again. So there's a little inconsistency there, since a ballot is deadlier than a bullet in the hands of most of these people.
Well, the book sounds fantastic, Lowell, and we're up against the break here. And I want to say thank you so much for coming on, Lowell Ponte, political columnist, consultant, and author. Thank you for your time today.
Always a pleasure. God bless.
All right, good to talk to you. So I agree, and he has a lot of information, news and information about what's going on with illegal immigration in the country. And we all know that California is, I mean, it would probably be better for the big earthquake to come and for it to fall off into the ocean than for us to have to deal with the 50-year prospect of cleaning it up. But there is a faster way, and that is that we have to have Republicans come out. Obviously not Mitt Romney. Yes, I saw the story today. You guys, if you haven't seen it, Mitt Romney, and go to my Facebook page, I posted the tweet from the president who responded. Even his niece, Ronna McDaniel, has responded to his horrible op-ed in the Washington Post where he's taking the president to task over apparently the president's character or lack thereof. Meanwhile, he lists all of the things the president's accomplished in the op-ed, which makes him sound like a sore loser, which is basically what he is. But there's a way to clean this up. We know there is, and we have to get to it. And it starts with the wall. We'll be back with more. Your calls right after this.
Out of all the people in the world, we've all done or will do the following: be birthed into this earth, grow, go to school, maybe go to college, get married, have kids, grow old, and die. Doesn't sound too eventful when put in that perspective. For many, the thought of discipling someone is foreign from the mind and not even on the to-do list. In Matthew chapter 28, verse 19, Jesus tells us to go ye therefore, make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. A disciple is more than a student. He or she is a follower of Jesus Christ. There are a lot of things in this world, but there's nothing like being a Christian. It's a life filled with adventures. Receiving an education, vacationing, marriage, having kids are good, but there's nothing like taking the time to nourish someone in God's word so that they can be a force to be reckoned with. That is priceless. With a heart for the urban family, I'm today's urban woman, Victory McIntosh. Connect with us at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Chris Brooks.
We cannot underestimate the responsibility of evangelism. That is why shows like this, Equipped, which is committed to equipping you every day to live, share, and defend your faith, are extremely important, because anyone who does not confess Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior is outside of God's saving grace.
Equipped. Weekdays at noon Central on Urban Family Talk.
I drank the 12-pack and a pint of vodka and didn't get drunk, and that scared me. So I decided to come in the Teen Challenge. God has a plan for my life, and I feel that I have another chance.
If you or a loved one are struggling with addiction, Adult to Teen Challenge can help. There are centers across the country, and you can find the one nearest you at 855-END-ADDICTION or at teenchallengeusa.com. This is Urban Family Talk.
I'm Chad Pergram with the Speaker's Lobby. The 115th Congress is coming to a close. Some voters appreciate the productivity of Congress, others may not. What Congress approved over the past 2 years is just as significant as what Congress didn't achieve. Take the longtime GOP promise to repeal and replace Obamacare. House Republicans finally muscled through their own health care measure. It then died in the Senate. Republicans re-engineered the nation's tax system for the first time in 3 decades, but political observers blame the tax law for Republicans losing House seats in New York, New Jersey, and California. Congress never addressed an infrastructure bill. There were bipartisan successes on criminal justice reform and opioids. Even though part of the government is now closed, the Senate moved at its fastest clip in decades on annual spending bills. That's why this is a partial government shutdown. Congress worked out the details on 5 of the 12 yearly appropriations bills months ago. We learned in 5th grade that Congress is designed to pass law. Quite the opposite. The founders created Congress to stop law. With the Speaker's Lobby, Chad Pergram, Fox News.
You can download episodes of Stacy on the Right from the podcast page on AFR.net or UrbanFamilyTalk.com. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
All I can tell you is that Democrats have voted for 700 miles of the Secure Fence Act that had double-layered fencing. Call that whatever you'd like. In the Gang of 8 bill, we had $42 billion for border security, including $9 billion for physical barriers. The wall has become a metaphor for border security. And what we're talking about is a physical barrier where it makes sense. In the past, every Democrat has voted for these physical barriers. It can't be just about because Trump wants it, we no longer agree with it. There's nothing immoral about a physical barrier along the border in places that make sense. So there'll never be a deal at the end of this year, the beginning of the next, that doesn't have money for the physical barriers that we all have in the past agreed we need.
Okay, let's dig into this. We'll get to the phones just 1 sec. We're gonna have every single idea that solves the problem for the border wall during this segment, and I have a few to kick off the discussion. First of all, Eddie Scary is writing over at, I don't have it here on my sheet, but he's a columnist, Eddie Scary, and I found it at Lucianne. He's talking about how the president first has to show Americans why this is so important. And we write the Democrats off often, but the fact is there are tons of Democrats who have family or extended family or people they know who've had illegal immigrant crime impact their household. And so they're aware that illegal immigrants commit crime, but they've seen it minimized. They've been told that it's morally wrong and incorrect to oppose illegal immigration. And so they're waiting on someone to show them that that's not true. They're also waiting on a demonstration of exactly what is it that we need down there. Do we actually want to put fence over waterways? Are we trying to fence craggy, mountainous, canyons and areas where there's nothing but boulders and concrete and rocks? What are we trying to do? Well, the president knows. He's got all of the proposals there. Why wouldn't he, instead of inviting the congressional members to the Situation Room, which is what's happening right now, why wouldn't he just lay out a proposal from the Oval Office with the big, huge TVs behind him, showing every bit of what it is that he's trying to do? No questions afterwards. None of this Jim Acosta standing up and grandstanding and making the whole thing about him. No opportunity for them to do anything but cover what the president is talking about, which is why we need the wall. Why isn't he doing that? And President Trump is a brilliant demonstrator. Back in 2016, when Mitt Romney attacked him for being a con man and said he was a fake guy and didn't have anything, no stakes, no ties, no real businesses, he was just a con man, President Trump went to Mar-a-Lago and pulled out stakes at Mar-a-Lago, which you can call them Trump stakes because he owns Mar-a-Lago. He pulled out the wine. He pulled out the ties. He showed it all and said, look, these are the businesses that I own that make these products, and they're manufactured here, there, and there, and they're bought and sold here in America and there and there and there. And so Mitt Romney is full of it. So, bite it, Mitt Romney. Why doesn't he do that about the border wall? Where is that Donald Trump? And I know he's being beaten down, which is why we have to pray for him. We can't stop praying for the president, just like we can't stop praying and doing our duty and our obligation to plug into that power source, which is Christ Jesus. We have to be praying for the president, because if you think about how horrible it is to work with someone who isn't a good coworker and how that person can sap all of your energy, just one bad coworker can actually decrease the efficiency on a team, any team, by like 80%. That's why you see so much care being given to who gets hired into certain organizations, because they know one bad hire can drastically reduce their profitability and their ability to set and achieve goals. That is what the president's dealing with. Only instead of one bad coworker, he's got hundreds of them attacking him on every side all the time. That's why we have to pray for him. So let's go to the phones. If you want to call in and join us, it's Happy New Year to you. We're here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. Loving every minute of it. We've got 866-963-2037. Couple lines open there for you to call in and join the program. 866-963-2037. Randy in Missouri, thank you for joining the show today.
Hey, thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
You mentioned the story about the refugee mob in Europe overrunning that area and that community, and it reminded me of a story that came out of Minneapolis just a couple of months ago, the first week of October. The very scene what took place in Minneapolis at a place called Valley Fair, which is an amusement park where over 100 Somalians overran the place, and a lot of people were beat up, and kids were kind of terrorized, and this was an action where over 200 police officers had to come, and everybody was evacuated out of the park. Now, when the local media reported on it, they just talked about a couple of people being arrested and there being a small disturbance. And these were all Somalians, they were all Muslims, and it was done intentional, kind of to install terror into the community for one reason or another. But the real point of the story is that the media covered the whole thing up, and it wasn't but for a few local radio stations that reported on the incident. And I guess maybe it had something to do with the election of Keith Ellison going on in that state. I don't know. Or maybe the murder that took place by the Somalian police officer the year before. But, the same thing just happened last week with these beheadings of the American tourists in Morocco. I guess the media did the same thing with that incident as well. They didn't report on what took place and why it was taking place.
Oh, Randy. So, the beachhead in Minnesota is completely the brainchild of Democrats and their desire and insistence on refusing to allow people who come into this country to assimilate. So instead of having people who are coming here from foreign lands put into communities where they can have, what we used to do is community centers had programs where families could adopt immigrant families. So a local family would adopt you. You didn't live with them, but they were kind of taking on the work of assimilating you, helping you and facilitating assimilation, which meant they would invite you to their church. They would invite you to their local civic group. If they were in Knights of Columbus or anything like that, they would invite you. And you would go to those meetings with them. And you might not end up going to their church permanently, but that continued relationship, whether it was helping to get the kids registered for school or introducing certain concepts like using deodorant, things like that, reinforcing social norms, that was something that we did, and it was a community-based effort, which meant not every community is going to have 100 families who want to do that, so immigration had to be done slowly, and that's how assimilation is achieved, which means no matter what country you're coming from, you can be assimilated into America. That's not happening anymore, and that's what's so depressing about this idea, because it makes, what they want to do is they want to make it seem as if Americans like Randy from Missouri, I'm living here in Missouri with my family, like we're xenophobic and we don't want immigration. We do. We just want the people to turn out to be Americans after a certain point of time. That's all. And that doesn't mean they kept to completely forsake their home country, but there's some reason they left that place. I'm so tired of seeing people on social media saying, my country that I come from is the greatest country on earth. Well, then why aren't you still there? Why are you here? If your country that you hail from is the greatest country on earth, what are you doing in America? You're in the wrong country. The country that's the greatest country on earth is the one you're living in and taking all the social services and participating in and driving up and down these pristine highways and byways and lollygagging through our parks and running up and down amok through our malls. That's the country that's the greatest country on earth. And if you don't think so, get thee back to your own country. That's all. It's not, I'm not trying to be mean. If that sounds mean, that's your problem. Just go on back to where you came from. We will not miss you here if you leave because you think the other country is better than here. You belong there. That's where you really belong anyway, because you don't understand the benefits of where you are now. Let's go to Kyle in Georgia. Kyle, thank you for calling the show today.
Oh, it's so amazing and refreshing to hear you say everything you just said, and I appreciate it so much. And to touch on that point as well, as Christians, obviously we want the best for everybody, and the best way is to allow people to create their own reality and create their own prosperity through their own hard work and dedication. But what happens is the left throws this idea that because you're a Christian, you should assign this idea that, love thy neighbor is taken to the effect of let your neighbor walk all over you and let them come into your house and, smoke in your living room and eat all the food in your kitchen, and that's the Christian thing to do, when it's like you said, to help them assimilate into culture. I mean, I can tell you there's no Little League association in the Somali communities. There's no, Wednesday night church in welcoming in the Muslim communities. And so my original point was, in regards to a border wall, a physical wall is a great deterrent, but I think what we could do is have landmines in between a fence, so you would have to cross a fence first, and then basically put it all over the media anywhere south of border America. It says if you cross this fence, you will possibly lose your life. Now come to this country if you have skills, if you have things to contribute, by all means, but you can't just walk into somebody's yard and set up camp.
So the first thing that happens when you say something like that, Kyle, landmines, they're like, well, that's illegal because we have soldiers and airmen who've lost their limbs over in, Bosnia and Herzegovina and places like that, Yugoslavia, during those wars when we would go over to try to help and the landmines would blow our soldiers up. And so people are always really hesitant to do things like that. But a simple wall works, a wall with barbed wire at the top with the metal parts that go down beneath the actual surface, that works. And I want to point out, Kyle is calling here, he's a Christian. He is not at all suggesting that we want to blow up illegal immigrants, but we do want to install a system that makes it so that people who would consider entering this country would consider the ramifications. And if you think about what Lowell Ponte said in the last segment about 70 grand a year per illegal immigrant, plus the fact that they take more services as they are here longer, plus the fact that China is actually waging war on us through illegal drugs. They're shipping it through the southern border, and that's killing 70,000 Americans a year. You only need to spend 5 minutes at a funeral for a 21-year-old girl who went to suburban schools, and the parents poured their hearts into this child and loved her and raised her right. And she got involved with some bad boyfriend who introduced her to opioids, and then she got addicted to them, and they sent her to treatment center, derailed this child's life. She's got a great GPA. She's going to go to college. She's accepted to college. And instead of going to college, she spends 3 years in and out of drug treatment centers. And after the third time, 3 months clean, she goes back and gets something laced with other bad drugs and overdoses. You only have to spend 5 minutes at a funeral like that before you really, if you have a heart, if you have a brain that works, if you have a conscience, can understand that the war that those Chinese are waging on us, it's real, and it's ripping apart families. So I'm totally about helping people, like Kyle said. We have enough wounded, disabled, and mentally compromised veterans in this country to take care of, that we would, if we never took another person in this country ever, we would have more than enough to take care of. And those people deserve our help. They've given their bodies to our country. They've left their limbs out in the foreign lands for our country. They deserve and are owed our assistance. They shouldn't be living on the street. They shouldn't be running around suffering from PTSD without any treatment. They deserve those 70 grand per person. That belongs to our veterans. And if you don't agree with me, get to the back. And it's a long walk because I'm over the target. The haters are plentiful, and I'm glad they're there because I know I'm on the right track when I hear nincompoops telling me that I'm xenophobic and I hate this and I hate that. I don't hate anything, but I do believe in right and wrong, and what we're doing as a country is wrong, and what we're reaping is the full grown fruit of that incorrect behavior. That's what we're getting. And I hate it just as much as any other person who's got their head screwed on right. I don't want it to be the truth, but the only way to stop it is for us to finally have to get up off our keisters and say, enough is enough. Not only do we have to be willing to pay that $350 per family to fund the wall separately, we have to go around Nancy Pelosi, but we have to actually start talking to these legislators, and we have to get the president's ear. He's got to start. The remittances alone would fund 8 walls. If we wanted a wall that was 8 walls deep, and went into Mexico and encroached on their property and dared them, I double dog dare you to come up, Mexico. What you going to do? What are you going to do if we build wall on your territory? Nothing. You ain't going to do anything, because the minute you do, we'll make that wall impenetrable, and we will no longer accept the cars built in your country, in our country. We'll take all our jobs back, and we'll no longer permit remittances to your country. You can remit to any other country you want to but Mexico. Play some games. Start something. You don't want any of this. They cannot handle what we can really do if we wanted to. We're allowing the Democrats to act like they run the whole show. They don't. They just have the media. But they're on the wrong side. If you've read the end of the book, you know we win. We don't just win. We win big, because big is eternity. If you're still in the call queue, hang on. I'll take you after these messages. If you're leaving us now, God bless you. Be back with you tomorrow from the Heartland. If you're sticking around, it's onenewsnow.com, and I'll be right back.
American Family Coffee is coffee with a cause. Not only is it a delicious way to start your day, but it can also wake you up to the idea of supporting the American Family Association through a product you'd normally buy anyway. Choose from morning blend, evening blend, and everything in between. Get your American Family Coffee and support the American Family Association at afastore.net.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
For American Family News, I'm Chris Woodward. It's not that much money. That's what President Trump says about the $5.6 billion he wants for a wall on the U.S. southern border.
This is national security we're talking about. You know, just like we talk about the military, just like we're talking about Syria or Afghanistan or all these different places. I mean, we spend in Afghanistan more in 1 month than what we're talking about for the wall. Think of that.
The federal government remains in a partial shutdown, with Republicans and Democrats pointing the finger at each other. That includes Democratic Representative Nancy Pelosi of California, who has argued that a border wall is immoral.
When they say the wall's immoral, well, then you got to do something about the Vatican, because the Vatican has the biggest wall of them all. The wall is immoral. Look at all of the countries that have walls, and they work 100%. It's never going to change. A wall is a wall.
More on the partial government shutdown at onenewsnow.com. Georgia police have identified 2 teenagers who died in an incident where a gun was mishandled. Fox's Gernal Scott has more.
Gwinnett County police say a teen showing off a handgun to his friends accidentally fired it, killing one of the onlookers. They say they believe the boy with the gun was distraught, running away and turning the gun on himself. Chad Carless was the boy who was shot. Devin Hodges took his own life. A neighborhood teen, Anthony Tran, says he feels for the families.
Just wondering about how bad the family feels about right now, like the way they're feeling, because those kids, the people that lost their lives, they have so much they had to live for.
Police are looking into how and where Hodges got the gun and who it belongs to. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee is done covering OxyContin and instead will encourage doctors to recommend alternative opioid relievers, which are designed to be more difficult to abuse. Blue Cross Blue Shield is also implementing what it calls prescription safeguards. The opioid overdose epidemic took 1,200 lives last year in Tennessee alone, which along with other states and cities across the country has filed suit against the maker of OxyContin, which denies it put profit over people. The mayor of California's third most populous city is hospitalized after being struck on a New Year's Day bike ride. Fox's Jeff Manasso has that story.
48-year-old San Jose Mayor Sam Liccardo was riding his bike in a bike lane in northeast San Jose when he was hit Tuesday, reportedly suffering a broken collarbone, a broken chest bone, and injuries to his neck and back.
If he did not have a helmet, I wouldn't want to see what he looked like.
Neighbor Linda Dutra helped the mayor, whose representatives say expects a full recovery. San Jose police say the driver stopped at the scene, saying he didn't see the mayor on his bike. Police are investigating. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
Police in Los Angeles have announced an arrest in a string of high-end celebrity burglaries, and they say the suspect is accused of stealing more than 2,000 stolen items. Police are attempting to locate victims to return stolen property that was seized. LAPD Captain Corey Palka is the commanding officer of the Hollywood Division and said that the items were discovered after a search.
Over 2,000 high-end items, which included stolen art, clothing, purses, jewelry, fine wine, and other very expensive items.
The suspect has been identified as Benjamin Ackerman. Authorities say he broke into homes in a variety of ways, including posing as a real estate agent and an individual interested in purchasing homes. In final news this hour, a board of high-ranking Maryland officials has rejected a pipeline across the western part of the state that would carry natural gas produced in nearby Pennsylvania to West Virginia. The Board of Public Works voted 3-0 today against an easement for TransCanada's proposed pipeline. It would run under the Potomac River and extend 3 miles from Columbia Gas's network in Pennsylvania to Mountaineer Gas's distribution system in West Virginia. Environmentalists oppose the pipeline. For more news and information, visit onenewsnow.com.
Abraham Hamilton III.
God put us in this world at this time to be salt and light. We don't fold because of the darkness that we're facing. This is not the first time in the world's history that it's gotten dark. God has called you and I to be his ambassadors, even in this dark moment.
Tune in to the Hamilton Corner, weekdays at 5 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
I'm in this fight all the way. I am optimistic. I believe in what we can do together.
Warren set up just an exploratory committee which allows her to fundraise and fill staff positions. Really no guarantee of a full-blown presidential campaign, but insiders expect to see one.
We'll see how she does. I wish her well. I hope she does well. I'd love to run against her.
This is a stalemate that the president is content to ride out. Unless he gets funding for the border wall and border security, he's simply just going to let this thing play out and see just how much pressure he can apply on the Democrats.
I think the president is telling us what he wants, and he's willing to do some things to get what he wants. And to my Democratic friends, there's some things that you want that can be had if you agree to border security in a reasonable way.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Yeah, get some border security in a reasonable way. There's nothing reasonable about border security. Have you seen that fence the Obamas are putting up around their house? And it's a part of Washington, D.C. It's a beautiful Tony area. They're neighbors with Ivanka Trump and her husband. And it's all those houses you usually see. If you're an Instagram person like me and you go on Instagram and you type in whatever kind of house you like, all these feeds will come up of accounts that show you these beautiful houses. And the Obamas are renting a house like that. I'm not sure if they've moved into the purchasing phase or what, but it's so that their daughter can finish out her high school career. And they're building a huge brick fence around it. And you know why? Because paparazzi camp out around there, because his wife just wrote a new book, because she's the new it girl of all the magazines and everything. And the photographers want live shots of her tooling around her garden or walking around outside the house, with Bo. They want to see her. They want pictures of her. So they're putting up a fence. Isn't that amazing? The Obamas. I mean, you would think, well, I'm sorry, what am I doing? That's just too much logic for this conversation. Let's go back to the phones. Greg in North Carolina, thank you for holding over. Appreciate your time today. What's your comment?
Well, I just have a question for you. I totally agree that we need to have sensible immigration reform, but my question is a wall really the best decision? Because 2/3 of illegal immigrants in this country don't even come over crossing the border. They come on visas and then they just stay put and they pass their visas.
No.
So
that number is 40%, not 2/3. It's 40% are visa overstays. But the violent criminals are not visa overstays. The violent criminals are the ones who cross over the southern border. So that's 60% of the illegal immigration is from the southern border. And that 60% is also, there's terrorists in there. They apprehended 71 terrorists last year. They have Bangladeshis coming in by the hundreds. And then, of course, the illegal immigrants from Guatemala, Mexico, Honduras, etc. Those ones are coming here. And that's 10% of the drunk driving, 10% of the drunk driving. So if your family member has been killed by a drunk driver, you have a 1 in 10 chance that that person was here illegally and your family member didn't have to die. That's what we have to stop.
Well,
and the wall is the most effective way. Yes, it is. Ask Israel. They have a wall at their border. What?
Isn't it a well-documented fact, though, that immigrants crossing the border actually commit fewer crimes?
No, it's not. No,
people who are just natural
it's
born
not.
citizens? Well,
not only is that not true.
Agree with you.
Yeah, well, so what's the agenda of the news stations? Come on, Greg. If you want to call into the show, let's have this conversation. Are you here to have a real, honest conversation?
I'm absolutely prepared to have an
honest conversation. Okay, so answer my first question, which is, do you believe that the news media is on the side of illegal immigration and the Democrats, or on the side of Trump and the Republicans? 98% of the news coverage is negative for President Trump. 98%.
I think that the news media's bias is toward being sensationalist and lazy and getting people to watch.
It's biased to the left. It's biased to the left, and if you're not willing to admit that, it's going to be kind of hard to get to the point where we can discuss illegal immigrants. You ask about their crime, if they're more law-abiding than American citizens. First of all, if we have a problem with crime, Greg, Don't quote the Washington Times or Washington Post with me. I just told you they give President Trump 98% negative coverage. So we're not going to talk about those outlets here because they would never, ever tell the truth about illegal immigration. But I want to talk to you about facts that come from our government that tracks these numbers. So, Greg, are you aware that in 2017 fiscal year, illegal immigrants committed 76,000 dangerous drug offenses? It's 126,000 of them. Are you aware of that?
But you can't look at it just as a raw number.
No, actually we can. If you have lost a family member to a drug overdose that they were dealt by an illegal immigrant, you would be more interested in this. What about the 48,000 assaults, the 11,000 weapons offenses, the 5,000 sexual assaults?
Well, I mean,
if you were sexually assaulted by an illegal immigrant, wouldn't you think that that raw number mattered? What about if you were kidnapped or your wife or your child? Maybe if you had been killed.
Ma'am, I understand.
No, don't, ma'am, you understand me. You don't understand me if you're defending illegal immigration. Every one of those numbers is a life. Raw numbers are lives. Can we agree on that? Is every one of those raw numbers a life?
No, okay, so
is every one of those raw numbers a life? We have to at least admit.
Anyone can commit a bad. Anyone can.
Yeah.
Commit a terrible
So we already have
act,
Americans who are criminals. We don't need new criminals coming here illegally. We don't need more criminals. We have enough of our own that we've grown that belong here that we have to keep. We don't need new ones.
They commit fewer crimes.
They do not. I just gave you the numbers. I just gave you the numbers.
They certainly do.
No, they don't. And the idea that you're arguing about that instead of acknowledging that those numbers represent people means you have a problem. And the problem isn't me or my show or the Washington Post. The problem is you are defending lawbreakers. You're defending them because you probably live in a liberal enclave where illegal immigrants, they're not going to live next door to you. You're not touched by the problem. Therefore, like you said, those are just raw numbers. But if a person's been raped or kidnapped or sexually assaulted, I dare you, Greg, to go up to that person and say, well, you're just a raw number. Who cares about your rape? I thought, Greg, that your party believed in believing all women. Isn't 1,800 sexual assaults or kidnappings too much? Isn't any woman who's been sexually assaulted, isn't she supposed to be believed? And aren't you supposed to defend her under the Me Too movement? I mean, you got to hold to your own party. Don't listen to me. Don't worry about the law. You, Greg, a defender of illegal immigration, but also a member of the Democratic Party and a purveyor of Me Too, why don't you actually spend time working with these women who've been sexually assaulted by illegal immigrants, believing them and trying to protect them from further victimization since they're women and they deserve to be believed?
I'm a paramedic. I've treated women who were sexually assaulted, ma'am. I've treated people who were drug overdoses. So you're not. But
they're just raw numbers. I'm sorry, Greg. Those are just raw numbers. Who cares what you did? Those are just raw numbers.
It's not a question of if they're raw numbers or not. It's a question of percentages because that's how.
No, that's what you said. You said that the people who were sexually assaulted that I just told you about, government numbers here, 5,000 sexual assaults.
Well, I didn't say that.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm missing what you're saying then. I'm missing. All I hear is defense of illegal immigration. The point to your call is to say what?
You want to hear, man, because you don't want to learn anything.
I've learned plenty.
You voice Trump and wave your flag and say, look how wonderful I am. But if you actually listen and think for a second.
I do listen, and I actually do think. I don't need to learn anything from you, Greg. Who are you? Who are you exactly to come on here and tell me I need to learn something from you? You don't even have your facts straight. If you want to teach me something, I welcome you to call back at any time. Tell my call screener you're Greg from North Carolina, and you can give me any information you'd like if you go out and research it and bring actual facts and information. You called here to argue with me based on what the mainstream media says, which has been debunked. That information is false. They're doing that on behalf of their arm, which is the Democrats. And you're actually trying to put that stuff off on the listeners today. And I can't allow it. I do respect you for working as an EMT, and the work that you do is good work, and I hope you continue it. But you will not be permitted to come on this show and teach me things. I'm using my little quote fingers here. Teach me things that are not actual things. You can teach those things to other people who might be open to that, but I don't have to. I don't even have my flag up today. I'm a veteran. I wear flags. I have them hanging all over our property, and I will continue to have one hanging at the back there on the live stream, but it's not about the flag. It's about what's right and what's wrong. And Greg, you're wrong, buddy, but call me back if you have something to teach me that's actually based in facts, and I'm willing to learn because I am open to learning and new information. It just has to be factual. That's what it has to be in order for it to get on here and be accepted. Now, if you're wondering what I was talking about, and maybe you've never heard this information, if If you're new to the program, I'm talking about a report that came out about 3 months ago talking about this 127,000 illegal immigrants who were arrested for these crimes. This was in the year 2017, and these illegal immigrants, according to Immigration and Customs Enforcement, these people committed 76,000 dangerous drug offenses, 48,000 assaults, 11,000 weapons offenses, 5,000 sexual assaults, that's rapes and sodomy, 2,000 kidnappings, and 1,800 Americans lost their lives at the hands of these, as Greg would say, people who just want a better life, who came over illegally but shouldn't have to leave because they need a better life. While they're killing Americans, they need a better life. Greg doesn't have to be impacted by this other than through his work, which those people who are sexually assaulted at Greg's work that he deals with, those people that he helps, they're just raw numbers. They're not people. They're not people who matter. They're just raw numbers. The percentages matter, and the percentages only matter if they favor the Democrats in illegal immigration. And also, I don't know anything, and I don't know any facts, and also Greg knows everything. That's why he has his own show. And, waving the flag is bad. I think that's the summation of that whole, that's it right there. Also, I didn't hear Greg pay homage and bow down to Me Too. I didn't hear him say that all women deserve to be believed. I didn't hear him say that those women who were raped, sexually assaulted, physically assaulted, deserve to be heard and understood. I didn't hear him say that their attackers deserve to be imprisoned or put to the death penalty or removed from this country. So Greg's not a good Democrat because he doesn't know how it works. Me Too means all women must be believed. All women have to be validated, and all of their concerns have to be uplifted at the expense of everything else. Greg doesn't seem to have the mantra down just yet. But if Greg wants to call back, I'll teach him how Me Too works, because I know I've seen it online. I've learned that from Democrats. That's one thing I've learned from Democrats, and I'm willing to help him out so he can be that good Democrat and actually operate on behalf of those raw numbers he says he treated at his work. And that was interesting. All right, so now I want to turn to this whole idea that we're in 2019. And a couple years ago, I wrote this op-ed about how the Democrats were going to obstruct. And it lit my actual physical mailbox on fire because it was for the Post-Dispatch and I was writing for them. And this article that I wrote about how they were going to obstruct, these people literally got so angry because it was the truth. And that's what the Democrats did. They just obstructed and obstructed because they don't have anything to run on. They're running on helping the mentally ill people, helping people who have all kinds of problems that are easily solved by better personal choices. But they're not here for actual sexual assault victims, rape victims, people who've been kidnapped. They're not here for the family out in, I think somewhere on the West Coast, this police officer was killed by an illegal alien. They're not here for any of that. And so it's interesting that Jonathan Turley, law professor, etc., he says what's left of the Democratic Party is beyond being opposed to Donald Trump. And he's saying, what do you guys stand for? You hate Donald Trump, but what are you here to do for the American people? And I've said the same thing. I said it on MSNBC when I was last on there on Politics Nation. There's not legislating that's about to happen. Nancy Pelosi she said we won't have a debt limit anymore. All they want to do is spend money like drunken sailors and have more illegal immigration and more lawlessness. But don't take it from me. Here's Jonathan Turley talking about how he doesn't see any real policies coming out or any ideas from the Democrats is number one.
Well, I grew up in a staunchly Democratic family in Chicago, and the Democratic Party used to represent something. But what we've seen in the last 2 years is that they've become the inverse image of Donald Trump, that this obsession is really worthy of Melville. It's this all-consuming effort which is beginning to erode what defines the Democrats. And what happens when Donald Trump leaves office? What is left of your party? If you take a look at the last year, it's really mystifying. When we were dealing with the FBI material that the Congress was seeking to release to the public, the FBI redacted a huge amount of that material, and many of us said, look, this is part of a pattern with the FBI. They often overclassify. It is often to protect themselves from embarrassment, not national security. And yet the Democrats said, no, you just have to accept what the FBI is saying about classification. Well, when those redactions were lifted, we found out they weren't weren't really classified. They were shielding embarrassing things about FBI officials. When Donald Trump said, I want to get out of Syria and Afghanistan, the Democrats who have long opposed endless or undeclared wars said, oh my God, this is hasty.
So, in other words, double standards persist. Scratch a scandal, find a Democrat, and also double standards persist. Had to repeat that because it's so true about them. When we get back, we're going to have Brigitte Gabriel. She's a terrorism expert and chairman of Act for America. Stay right there.
Here's American Family Association President Tim Wildman.
Lynn Ingram and Jim Duncan, two Texans, support and believe in our ministry here at AFA and AFR.
We know more about the laundry business than anything else. We know a little bit about a lot of things, but we know a lot about the laundry and dry cleaning business.
They created a laundry detergent to sell to folks to support AFA.
We just want to be able to provide a product that can be used by AFA to support the ministry.
When you wash your family's clothes with Redeem Clean laundry detergent, you can take great satisfaction in knowing that you're supporting the vital work of the American Family Association. It's a unique way to increase your giving to AFA. For clean laundry and support of a cleaner society, it's Redeem Clean. Learn more about the Redeem Clean products when you visit redeemclean.afastore.net.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
In this new year, churches face a number of threats. The Alliance Defending Freedom is warning churches of 7 threats to their religious liberty. Pastors and their congregations need to know what these threats are and be prepared and protected. Now, one threat to pastors is the potential loss of a provision that treats housing for pastors as tax exempt. This has been threatened for many years, but faces a major challenge by the Freedom from Religion Foundation in the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals. A second threat affects the relationship of churches to the IRS. Currently, churches are exempt from the requirement to file a Form 990. Filing such forms can reveal private donor information. If that case is lost, churches would be forced to disclose private giving information to the public. A number of churches already face significant challenges from local government in their area. Churches in some areas have been denied the use of public facilities that other organizations are granted access. ADF talks about one case that has big implications for church plants and other small churches that cannot otherwise afford to build. In other cases, local government has used discriminatory zoning codes that override the rights of churches, blocking them from using buildings they already own. This year, your church may be facing the prospect of having to pay a parking tax. This was included in the Federal Tax Cuts and Job Act and applies to churches and ministry employees. Finally, there have been a number of cases in which government officials try to intimidate churches and pastors with letters and warnings about what pastors can say about political issues. Pastors and churches need to be aware of these threats and take appropriate action. I would encourage you to support some of the religious liberty organizations fighting for you and your rights. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
This is Stacy on the Right with Stacy Washington on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program. I am absolutely into new ideas and new solutions. But I do kind of take offense when someone says that I'm just into supporting President Trump and waving a flag without ever having listened to the podcast and heard the many times that I've criticized the president and talked about the things that I feel like are really problematic that he has to overcome because of his, it's poor decision making. And those statements, that doesn't win me any points. You know what I mean? That those making those kinds of statements and telling that truth, it doesn't get me invitations to Mar-a-Lago or to do certain things. And I know there are people who are very strong supporters of the president who get to do all of that stuff, and it's fun. But that's not what I'm here for. I'm not here for the popularity contest. If I were, I wouldn't be here at all. As a black woman, it is much easier for me to silently grit my teeth and vote for Democrats and have all of the friends in the world and be in all of the dinner clubs and all of the book clubs and have my kids invited to all of the best parties. And my husband and I spend just untold amounts of time enjoying ourselves and having, just spending time with all kinds of different people, and to have actual power, the kind of power that matters to people here on this earth. If I really wanted to be popular and to have tons of friends and to just have things be easy, then that's what I would do. But I get a lot of pleasure out of knowing that what I am doing is the opposite of that road, and I'm still enjoying it, and my husband is still enjoying it, and the kids are still enjoying it, and that God is blessing us in spite of those who they don't want us around. They don't want their kids at our house. They don't want to invite us to certain things that I don't have any power. That's actually enjoyable for me, because if you've noticed, look at the wrinkly, upset faces of the people who have all the power. Look at the lack of enjoyment that they seem to have. Look at all of the different things that come along with that package. I'm glad not to have it. And the popularity, it really doesn't matter. You really can only spend time with about 4 actual real friends. It's proven. There have been studies that have been done. How many real friends can you have and enjoy? It's like 4. Especially if you're married with kids, you really don't even have time for 4 friends to spend time with them regularly. So all of it is for naught. Not because I'm so fantastic or wonderful. It's the opposite. I'm a wretch. I'm a sinner. I'm saved by grace. I'm at that very basic level, and I know it. I'm not deluded, and there's no grandeur over here. But what there is a real understanding that, we just don't have any time to be dealing in non-facts. Every minute counts. Every day counts. Every one of these minutes that we let pass by while we still don't have a wall are other toddlers getting raped by illegal immigrants. And that's inconvenient conversation. When people hear me saying that, well, I just don't want to listen to that. Or when we talk about abortion, well, I just don't want to listen to that. That's just too tough of a topic. Okay, you're still on the bottle. You're not ready for the meat. That's fine. But others who are ready for the meat and need this true information they're here already. They're waiting for it. And that's why I'm here to give it to them. Not because I want to be popular. So it's really not about me not wanting to learn anything. A fool can't teach me anything. You can't do it. If you believe that illegal immigrants are more law-abiding than American citizens, which includes gun owners who are more law-abiding than the law enforcement community, who are the most law-abiding community in the country, if you believe that illegal immigrants are more law-abiding than American gun owners, then we can't talk. It's just that simple. You don't have things in your brain that are true facts. That's why it's impossible for us to have a dialogue. And there's nothing wrong with acknowledging that. Nothing. So, we were listening to Jonathan Turley, and I don't know if we got close to the end of that. It sounded like we were really close to the end of that. But he was explaining how the Democrats have this double standard where they don't believe that we should believe the FBI if the FBI is saying things that are beneficial to Republicans. But if they're talking about how horrible Donald Trump is, well, then, James Comey is the next second coming. He's everything. Just bow down, okay? So here he is. He's finishing up this idea. And, the reason this is important is because if you read, and I know we talked about it just briefly, and I did finish it. It's the new book by Tucker Carlson. It's called Ship of Fools. And boy, I tell you what, it's one of those times where I kind of do wish I had some clout so I could get him on the show, because I have questions I want to ask him about the book. Genuine questions. I couldn't find much in it that I disagreed with, to be honest. And not because he's on Fox and I'm a right-winger, quote unquote, but because the book was really well researched. And one of the things he talks about in the beginning of the book is his patchouli-scented teacher from 2nd grade, and how she was a liberal, and how even though she made his life just, actually it's 1st grade, how he still remembers how much he hated being in her class because she was like worshiping the earth and this and that, and they'd have to sit in the dark and think about global warming or cooling or whatever the rage was back then. But he says people like her were responsible for putting appropriate checks and balances on capitalism. And a lot of people have said about me and believe that I think unfettered, unchecked capitalism is something that should occur, and, just let the free market reign. I do think we should unleash the free market, but it should not be unfettered and unregulated. We do need some regulation. We do need laws. We need checks and balances to help people not get out of control. And so while I'm not hugely in favor of unions at this stage of our, industrial development, we're even past that with technological development, unions serve a purpose. Unions stop businesses from treating people like robots. And so in the book, Tucker Carlson goes into it a number of different times. He goes down this vein, and he's very methodical in ticking off the ways that classical liberals and old Democrats, not this current iteration, but Democrats from before, they use their power to place checks on unfettered capitalism. Companies that didn't respect the environment. They were into the causes that they espoused, and they made a difference with them. So it doesn't mean I want to be a Democrat, but if we still had those kinds of Democrats around, then we would have checks and balances so that we could have, fantastic economic growth, but people would still be people. They'd be employees, and they would be respected and treated well. And it's funny to me that the very people who are treating employees the worst right now, namely Amazon, a company that we recently, last year, in the last quarter of last year, I went through and I reduced our automatic deliveries from Amazon down to a very, very low amount. And I'm, slowly researching whether or not I want to continue to do business with Amazon on the auto delivery side for pantry because of their treatment of their workers, because of their bias against conservatives, the way they'll push conservative books down in the rankings and they won't pay people who've sold books on Amazon who are conservatives. All of these behaviors are those of someone who feel they're above the law. Jeff Bezos doesn't feel like he's like me or you, where we have to be careful to be within the law. And the reason that Tucker Carlson's book going into this was so fascinating to me is that Jeff Bezos is a liberal. And so liberals from the olden days, 25, 30 years ago, would have opposed Jeff Bezos. They would have said, look at the way you monitor the number of steps your employees take around the warehouse. You don't let them take bathroom breaks. They're using the restroom into, water bottles so that they don't have to take the extra 500 steps to and from the restroom. They don't want to have the computer ding them. These are people. They have to have time to use the restroom. You have to figure out a way to do this so that they can have normal human activity. But liberals don't care about that because Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post, and they like him controlling that. They like having him in their back pocket. The power that he represents, the things he's able to do on behalf of liberalism, the money that he funnels into their causes, far and above outweighs the benefit of them defending those workers. Do you hear that? That's the sound of unfettered capitalism. Only instead of it being big, rich Republican robber barons who are doing it, it's liberals. The richest people in America right now on the tech side, they're all dyed-in-the-wool hardcore Democrats. And they don't care about their workers. They're not concerned with the ramifications of their push to have, open borders. They don't care that the same people who vote for them will be the ones who don't have jobs. If we were to open our borders wide up, the crime, the violence, the destruction of our whole society, these things would happen to the same people who are voting and who respect and who frequent the businesses of Facebook, Amazon, et cetera, et cetera. And so it was fascinating to read that in his book and to hear him talk about it. And that's why these comments from Jonathan Turley are so important for us to kind of pay attention to. Jonathan Turley is hardly a dyed-in-the-wool Republican. He's a law professor, but his commentary comes from a place of concern about the direction that we're headed. So I want to listen to Turley too, and then we can take a... Oh, okay. And we did get the majority of that first clip, according to my producer. So thanks, Devin. That's fantastic. So we'll do Jonathan Turley too, and then if you want to call in and talk about the clip or whatever, it's the first day back for the new year. I'm so glad to be here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. 866-963-2037. Let's listen to number 2.
Republicans have to be careful, too. If they just simply become the party of Donald Trump, they're going to have the same vacuum once he leaves the office. But what's strange about the Democrats is even their rhetoric seems to be adopted from an earlier time. If you look at what Democrats are now saying about Russian influence, we all, I hope, agree that the Russian interference with our election was terrible, worthy of sanctions, and worthy of investigation. But more and more Democrats are saying that anyone who associates with Russians are traitors and they're our enemy. It's this sort of Cold War language that usually the Democrats dismissed and opposed. So the only point of the column is this. that at some point the Democrats are going to have an identity separate from Donald Trump. And if they go into 2020 as simply the inverse image of Donald Trump, then we're really not going to have a two-party system. We're going to have a 1.5-party system.
And that's dangerous. That's another thing that Tucker Carlson pointed out in his book, Ship of Fools. He talked about how the two-party system, so everyone, he's talking about a time when Democrats were opposed to illegal immigration because it hurt workers. And Republicans were, they were opposed to it, but a little laissez-faire about it because obviously some Republicans are business owners and appreciate the cheap labor. And so it was a constant, kind of push and pull because legislators would say, well, we want a wall. I mean, we've had these same speeches that Donald Trump has been giving. Same exact speech. Bill Clinton gave it back when he was president. Same exact speech. Feinstein gave it in California. I mean, you should watch the video because her hair, it's like totally 80s hair. Amazing shoulder pads. We're talking about the same things that are happening back then. They're happening now. Same exact speeches, same exact promises being made. The only difference is I think everybody knows that if Donald Trump is given the funding, a wall will go up because he's a businessman and he's in the real estate industry, and that's all he knows. All he knows is setting out architectural drawings, timelines, deadlines, and getting it done so he can move on to the next project. A wall will get built. And no, it will not be an impervious wall that is continuous across all, 2,000 plus miles of border, but it would be one that would prevent illegal immigration. A combination of things put together to address the needs of the various types of terrain that are present on our southern border that would prevent illegal immigration. And that's what Americans are looking for. Democrats as well. I wrote it for the Kansas City Star about this survey that was done here in the state of Missouri. And Missouri is a Midwestern state, but it is not all that unrepresentative. In other words, people here are not that odd or out of the mainstream. In fact, we're more mainstream than if you take surveys in California or, at the very liberal parts of the East Coast. Over 68% of people want the border sealed and less immigration. 68%. Missouri is not a 68% Republican state. We have a supermajority in the legislature, but we do not have 68% of the people here in Missouri as dyed-in-the-wool, hardcore, Trumplicans, as people have been calling the new iteration of the Republican Party under President Trump. So I think one of the things that it's disturbing, but it also points to the futility of only seeing politics as the end-all, be-all of this situation is the fact that we see when the Republicans were in charge for 2 years, they did not repeal Obamacare. They did not build a wall on the southern border. They could have had it completed in 2 years. They couldn't get their stuff together. And I will say this as well. Another thing that you see on the Republican side that you don't see on the Democrat side, and I hope Greg is listening because here I am criticizing Republicans. I wonder am I still waving the flag? Am I still supporting Donald Trump? I have no idea what exactly propelled him to make such blanket, inaccurate statements about where I'm coming from, other than he hasn't listened to the show. It's funny to me, the timing of this Mitt Romney thing, because I've seen some speculation about Mitt Romney he wants to be president so badly, and he wants it for his religion because he's a Mormon, and he believes that because we've had a Catholic president and we've had Protestants and now we've had Donald Trump, who really doesn't have a declared denominational religion other than he's, generally a Protestant, but he's been married more than 2 times. There's all these different milestones for the presidency. We've had a black president, and now he wants to be the first Mormon president. And so he's desperate for it. And he's actually thinking about going again, which I think that's unfathomable. I do not see a universe in which Mitt Romney becomes the president of the United States, because I can tell you, if he were the nominee for the Republicans next time, I wouldn't vote for him. I would not vote for him now. And I voted for him once. And so I saw him today. He's going on the shows. Actually, it was not yesterday. It was whatever day before the op-ed came out. So it was yesterday. He's on some of the shows. And he's going to be a darling of the left because they'll use him up as much as they can because they see that he's attacking the president, and that's useful for them. So that's good for sound bites. It's good for a few interviews, but it's not going to help him. He becoming the Jeff Flake of the Senate Republicans and not being a reliable vote. It's adding another to that little cabal of 2 who they always vote against the pro-life issues. Now you have 3 with Mitt Romney. He's trying to chip away at that Senate majority. But that's not how you win the Republican nomination for the presidency. If he decided to primary the president, he would be viciously torn apart by Donald Trump and by Trump supporters, who are the president's approval rating with Republican women is in the mid-90s, and overall it's 88%. So 12% doesn't get you the nomination. Not only that, but he doesn't have the party apparatus anymore like he did when he rammed himself through the last time. This is a horrible, horrible way for him to start out, but it's his choice, and we'll see where it takes him. We'll be back with more after this. Stay there. This is Just a Minute with Stacey Washington. How can we bless our husbands when we are in our prayer time? By interceding on their behalf. We can ask God to make our husbands the head and not the tail, above and not beneath. We can besiege God to make them known in the gate. We can ask God to show us ways that we can bless our husbands in our speech and our actions and the way that we care for them. We can ask our Father in heaven to shower husbands with new ideas for business and ministry opportunities, and for God to bless them and make them wise and lengthen their days. Remember, he who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall remain stable and fixed under the shadow of the Almighty. No foe can stand against our God. The prescription for today's man-hating culture is praying wives, interceding before God daily. I'm Stacey Washington. Find out more at StaceyOnTheRight.com.
Holy Spirit speaks to everybody. The problem is most folks don't listen.
Lonnie Poindexter.
If they do listen, they don't take it to heart or they get fearful or whatever. But when you listen and act upon it, wonderful things happen. And because a man of God heard the voice of God and acted upon it, it blesses me today. And you as well for listening in.
Lion Chasers. Weekday mornings at 10 Central on Urban Family Talk.
On the Hour of Intercession, we have guests on a regular basis, and sometimes our guests have titles like doctor or pastor, but sometimes they have no title at all.
Pastor Joseph Parker of the Hour of Intercession.
One powerful truth to recognize is that every believer has a testimony, and they can teach you something about prayer as they share their own personal prayer journey.
Listen weekday afternoons at 1 Central here on Urban Family Talk.
Donald Trump's America.
Visitors to Washington won't be able to visit the Smithsonian's more than dozen museums after using unspent dollars to stay open the first week of the partial government shutdown. The Smithsonian closed after the new year. It's perhaps the most visible impact of the shutdown, but agencies warn additional services will either cease or slow down the longer the shutdown continues. The USDA is still doing meat and food inspections, and SNAP benefits will continue through January. But the agency says other federal nutrition benefits could lapse, and county offices are closed, as are development loans and grant processing. The Treasury Department is impacted by the partial shutdown. That means the IRS filing season begins in early January. Right now, most IRS employees are furloughed. House Democrats plan to vote to reopen the government tomorrow, but the legislation would not provide border wall funding that's been demanded by President Trump. In Washington, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
You can watch a live stream of the show on Facebook or YouTube at Stacey on the Right. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Well, I can't really tell whether it's a smart move for her or not, but I think this is a total gift to President Trump. Now, this is the candidate that he clearly wants. My own view is I think Democrats want a new generation of leadership. That's always been my view. They're looking at somebody like a Kamala Harris or Beto O'Rourke or Cory Booker. I think that's where they want to go. But Elizabeth Warren also brings other baggage to the table as well. I've been critical of my own party at times for some of these nativist, isolationist, protectionist inclinations or social intolerance. But Elizabeth Warren brings to the table all the things that I think much of red state America dislikes. This war with industrial and agricultural America that too many Democrats are engaged with. I mean, she's very clear. She doesn't like the financial services industry. She doesn't like the pharmaceutical industry. She doesn't like the insurance industry. She doesn't like any of these industries where a lot of frankly, my former constituents worked. And I think this is going to be a very big problem for Democrats if they nominate someone like her. There are going to be a lot of Trump-leery Republicans and independents, who are looking for an alternative. They'll just say, but I can't do that. So I think this is a gift to Donald Trump.
Welcome back to the show here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. Guess what? He's right. That was former GOP Representative Charlie Dent. He's talking about Elizabeth Warren and how she's clearly the candidate that the president would want to run against. Now, I want to make it clear to you, it's not that she couldn't have won, but her moment has passed. And the moment has passed when liberals who supported you and still do kind of support you as far as her being a senator, we covered this on the show, one of the prominent writers from her city wrote that her time has passed and she's not the nominee. They're looking for someone different. Now, Elizabeth Warren has really kind of made some gaffes because she's trying to be somebody else. And, we've seen this before. We've seen it before. Someone will do something viral online and then everyone will start doing it. And so one of the things that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez did during her campaign is she would live stream in her kitchen making her famous macaroni and cheese with bacon bits on top. And she'd have some campaign staffers there and she would talk to people in the comments. And it was very now and kind of an it girl thing for her to do. And it worked for her because, she's young and it was something that she just did on the fly. And a lot of people do it. I do it. I have pictures on my Instagram when I cook something and I'm like, ooh, look what I made, stuffed peppers. And so I'll put a picture of it on Instagram. I sometimes will live stream when something happens in the news. I'll get on Facebook and I'll live stream and, talk to people on my page about it. And it's fun to do. But if that's not something you've been doing, if you do it in exactly the style of someone else, it's kind of like you're saying that could work for me. And if it did work for her, it'd be great. But she's getting mocked because she opened a beer and was drinking the beer and cooking in her kitchen. And, we all know she lives in a $4 million mansion and she has staff. And so she didn't have to open her own beer, nor did she have to cook her own meal. So it's a little interesting that she's choosing to make these kind of gaffes. It's an exploratory committee that she's formed. And, we know she wants to run for the presidency. But on the other side, like not even on the other side, just adjacent to Elizabeth Warren and all of her antics is Bernie Sanders, who is currently taking the temperature of the Democrats, especially the progressive wing, to see if he should run again. So another old person. And you guys know I have respect for every person of every age. I'm using the vernacular of these younger progressives. They see Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren as being too old, and also they're white. They want someone diverse. They want someone younger. They want to recreate the momentum and the feeling of President Obama's historic presidency. And I had said previous to this that I didn't think Michelle Obama was running, but this press junket for the book and the L cover and all this other stuff, something is afoot. I hope nothing is afoot. I hope I'm wrong, but it seems like there's something more to this than just she's writing a book because she was just the first lady. I mean, it's a great time for her to capitalize on coming out of the White House. It's the best time for her to write a book. Most first ladies and presidents, that's when they bring a book out if they haven't already written one. Her husband's already got books under his belt, so it is her turn, quote unquote. And they were given huge advances for a book for each of them after they left the White House. So none of this is a surprise, but the amount of press she's doing for it is it's huge. It's outsized. It's like there's a vacuum and she's just stepped into it and she's just getting bigger and bigger to fill it up as far as her persona, if you will. So you've got that. You've got Elizabeth Warren doing that. You have, which if you think, and I think Mitt Romney would be totally savaged. If he was not savage the last go round, he would be it would be like just a little pile of dust, like in the cartoons when Wile E. Coyote would get blown up by the rabbit and there'd only be a little pile of dirt there. And then as a kid, you'd think, is he gone? And then he would reappear and you're like, oh, okay. It'd be like that. He would still be here, but all we would see of him is a little pile of that cartoon dust from where Trump had completely just, blitzed him. Same thing with Elizabeth Warren. If she thinks that the mocking that she received over the whole Pocahontas was pretty bad the last time, bad enough that she went and took a DNA test, and then when the results came back, instead of her keeping it to herself and never letting us know she took one, she actually made it public, just wait for round two. Donald Trump probably already has jokes, like an arm's length worth of jokes about Pocahontas and the fact that she's taken this test and she's really a white person. She's not an Indian at all. And she just she wouldn't survive it. And I don't mean she would literally not survive it. I mean her political persona would not survive the onslaught of President Trump taking her on over these issues, these tertiary, unimportant issues that are only important because she's a Democrat. And the Democrats worship their skin. They worship the skin of minorities, and they have a hierarchy of who's better than other people, like gays are better than blacks and illegal immigrants are better than gays and blacks, and et cetera, et cetera. That's real on the Democrat side. And anyone who wants to be taken seriously, you have to know that if you're running as a Democrat, and you can't have any of that stuff in your background. So at least Kamala Harris doesn't have any of those kind of gaps in her background. But Cory Booker has the I am Spartacus moment and the interrogation over homosexual sex that he did on the one nominee that was before him in the Senate Judiciary panel. And he's now had to come out and declare that he's not a homosexual. He'll evolve on that. If he were ever elected, he would evolve into one within one term. After he were reelected for the second term, he would then evolve and he would be the first homosexual president. I'm willing to lay odds on that. So as I'm ticking down the list, do you see a pattern? These people are not the clean, perfect candidates that they would like. Now, Beto O'Rourke, okay, there's a guy who has, he has legs, not because he's got wonderful ideas or a history that's perfect to go on, but because the DUI that it was like a hit and run type thing, and he was driving under the influence, and that was so long ago that most people are going to be willing to overlook that. He does have that, looks like JFK, which I know if you're like me, you're thinking, what does that matter? It matters a lot to Democrats. They want someone who's exciting and good to look at, like they had with Obama. Beto O'Rourke feels that it doesn't matter if he's dumber than a box of rocks. He's got the look that they're looking for, and he's younger. And then, of course, there are others. I mean, the list of people, I saw some kind of pictogram where there are like 30 people who could possibly run. I don't think they all have the ability to withstand the onslaught of what running for the presidency actually entails, but there are a bunch of them that are looking at doing it. And Joe Biden has the same problem that Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton have, and that is he's old and he's white. And for Democrats right now, those are two characteristics that they're not interested in. Now, on our side, the danger that we have is that some never Trump group would put someone up and that person would have enough power late in the process to derail the president's reelection by siphoning off a bunch of votes. We just have to pray that won't happen. Like I said about the immigration, love the one you're with. We don't have anybody on the Republican side who would be better at dealing with this level of political rancor from the Democrats than Donald Trump. And that's me saying that in addition to the fact that I like Nikki Haley. And I hope that one day she will be, vice president, maybe even the president. I don't know what the future holds, but she's someone I think who has the political genius and wherewithal, and also the background, having been a former governor and then ambassador to the UN. I think she could actually do the job. If not the presidency, definitely the vice presidency, and I would love to see that. Maybe she could run on a Pence-Haley ticket, right? After Donald Trump, then you get Pence and he chooses Haley. That sounds pretty awesome. Anyway, I mean, that's so far away, it's really inconsequential. So, speaking of those who have political power, staying power, Nancy Pelosi. So you guys know she has 4 kids, right? And one of them is a writer. She's a journalist, and she's often on the shows on cable. And she was asked about her mom returning to the speaker's gavel and what that meant to her. And so she first deflected and said, well, you know better than to ask me about that. I didn't clip the part where she says, one thing you need to know about my mom is she'll cut your head off and you won't even know you're bleeding. Okay. If that's the way you like to talk about your mom, okay. I get the metaphor. She's a political operator. She's a knife fighter. She doesn't back away from a fight. I get it. She's been there for decades. If she wasn't like that, you'd have to wonder what have you been doing there? But she did have something to say that I thought was pretty fascinating. I'll let you listen to it, and then we can discuss. And also, call lines are open, 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. We're going to talk about this on the other side. Let's listen to Pelosi's daughter here, number 5.
You know, when Nancy Pelosi came to town, it was a boys' club. That was 30 years ago. It's a boys' club. Look around tomorrow. It's going to be a whole new America. You're going to see something so magical that you have not seen before. I think I know Trump gets all the attention and his wall, but if you think about it, when you think about how this country is changing fundamentally, when you look at who's representing us, it's going to be a beautiful menagerie.
This is Nancy Pelosi's daughter talking about the swearing in tomorrow and how there's going to be all these women there. Now, it is a change to have 98 women sworn into the House at the same time. I'm not against it. I am against Nancy Pelosi making this announcement that she's going to eliminate the debt ceiling and that she's also allowing headgear on the floor for the first time. It's never been allowed before for men or for women. Now we're going to have Muslims wearing headgear on the floor of the House, which is utterly against the concept of freedom and women's rights. But, you know, whatever. Democrats always trying something new. What I thought was interesting is that she's trying to act as if we've never had women representing us at all. It's like she's saying this is so historic and this is so awesome that it's nonsense. She said it was going to be magical. Is she a grown-up? Like, okay, if I were talking about a friend's wedding, like one of my girlfriends a couple years ago, like 3 years ago, her daughter got married. And I don't know what it is about weddings. I don't know if you feel this way too, but for me, when we go to a wedding and I'm sitting there with my husband and the kids, it takes me back to that moment where I was standing up on, up there with my husband and we were saying our vows, and it hits me like a ton of bricks that all this time has passed by, over 20 years, 3 kids, all of the things that we've been through, the storms we've weathered, the churches we've attended, the places we've lived, the houses we've, all of that. It hits me like a ton of bricks. And every time we go to a wedding, it just makes me cry. And it is something magical when I see the couple exchange their vows. And it's like something happens in the air when they go from being 2 people to being one. It is magical. I would call that magical. I would say back when my husband and I were expecting our kids, and I went from the realization that, you're pregnant, but this one thing to be pregnant is another thing to actually give birth and see the baby. It's magical. There are other moments that are magical. Like there are magical moments, but just swearing in a bunch of women to the House of Representatives, not magical, not in my world. There are things that God has given to us to experience here on this earth that have a magical quality, magical as a descriptor. That's not one of them. And I don't mean it's not one of them for me. I mean, it's not one of them, period. Disagree, fight me. I don't care. I'm tired of people taking things that are special and wonderful and giving the descriptors for that, the labels for that, the way that we honor those things over to like government processes, swearing in a bunch of House of Representative members who may or may not even be there in 2 years. A bunch of people who might go there and not present one piece of legislation, not have one good idea to help Americans. You know what would be magical is if the Democrats had a bunch of ideas and legislative proposals that would actually help Americans, lower the number of Americans who are being killed by opioids. If the Democrats would lower the number of Americans who are being kidnapped by illegal aliens or killed on our roads by drunk drivers. If the Democrats had any proposal to spur job growth and creation and to lower the number of kids who are not proficient or advanced in reading and mathematics in the 4th grade. If they could figure out a way to help kids get to the graduation day and walk across the aisle proficient and advanced and ready to hit the workforce or college. Any ideas from the Democrats would be magical. You know what I'm saying? All right, I'm back, and I'll be back with you tomorrow. God bless you. Welcome home, and good evening from the Heartland.